Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me, Sue Mountstevens, Police and Crime Commissioner, and Chief Constable Andy Marsh. Thank you, Andy, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
This is the 5th Facebook live chat we've had over this last year. Boy, does time go fast. And I think that what we're trying to do is, as a PCC, I'm holding the Chief Constable to account and asking him questions on your behalf about policing, community safety matters and criminal justice. So this is really an extension of what I'm trying to achieve on making the constabulary as open and transparent as possible, and to be able to answer the questions that you have sent in. So over the next 20-30 minutes, we have a whole range of very different subjects that we're going to talk about, which will include the terror attacks, hate crime, female genital mutilation, and road safety matters, particularly speeding. So, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start on the recent terror attacks. This is the following the 4 very tragic atrocities that we've seen. I think it's important to address local people's concerns because they raise it with me. So could you just start, Andy, by saying, what are the constabulary doing in order, having responded to seeing what's happened in Manchester and London?
Well, we now police in a global environment. So never mind Somerset and all of our communities, never mind the United Kingdom, actually anything around the whole world can impact what we're doing on a day-to-day out of our bases. And one of the realities of social media and the internet is that actually what's happening anywhere in the world happens to beam itself very quickly into people's lives, into their bedrooms, into their private lives, in real time. So the terrible, terrible attacks that took place in London, in Manchester, actually had an immediate impact on us. And so I was able to view them real time, as were many members of the community. And there are some really serious implications for policing on lots of different levels. So I hope that people will be reassured that almost immediately we stood up a command infrastructure. So I had a senior officer leading our response. They had a number of priorities. On a human level, we were all horrified by what we saw. As police officers, we wanted to help, and we also needed to do our duty, which was to protect the people that we're here to serve. So what it meant, to give you a flavour of some of the things that we did, we set the command structure up, we immediately reviewed what happened and decided how we addressed some of those things that we needed to do, helping people protect people. So we reviewed our patrol levels. We needed to reassess the patrol levels to make sure that we had sufficient police officers, PCSOs, police staff, including armed officers, on the streets and available to protect our communities. And we particularly looked at crowded places that might be of interest to terrorists who would wish to harm us and the way that we live our lives. But we also looked at forthcoming events, including the Glastonbury Festival, and we've just finished the Harbour Festival yesterday. Yep. So we changed our policing in real terms to all of those, with more armed officers, more PCSOs, more staff available. And it is important to pay tribute to those men and women that have worked very long, extended hours, away from their families, doing their very best to protect people. Importantly also, we wanted to be there to reassure our communities, and lots of people, everyone, will have seen what happens through the media. Some parts of the community will have felt very destabilised, possibly vulnerable, possibly more frightened, perhaps than you and I would be. So I'm thinking particularly about Islamic communities that unfortunately, in the aftermath of terrorist attacks like that, have suffered more hate crime, and they felt very unsettled about their place within our society and their safety within that. So we needed to make contact and reach out to all sorts of community leaders, communities, and reassure and be present for them. And then in very real terms, we did have a number of police officers and police staff, over 30, that took part directly in attending the scenes, supporting people who've been attacked, and taking part in the investigations to bring to justice those responsible.
Oh, so your officers went up to Manchester and London?
Yes, a number of them did, yeah, okay. to actually practically help, and I've made sure that I thank them as far as possible for the incredibly difficult but important work that they've supported the Met and Greater Manchester Police on.
They must have seen some terrible things.
Yeah, it's a very difficult job, but actually, strangely, as a police officer, doing something to try and help is one way of dealing with the tension and the pressure. So I know that they felt it was incredibly difficult, but in one sense they felt privileged to be able to do something to try and make things better.
We see, as you mentioned, that they are sort of global terrorism atrocities that we've seen. But one of the things that local people say to me is, could this happen here? Could this happen in Avon, Somerset? Have you any local intelligence that this might happen to us here?
Well, there are lots of things that worry me as Chief Constable around my responsibilities to deliver the police and crime plan and protect our communities and make sure that my police officers and police staff hopefully go home after the end of the day's duty. Actually, of course it could happen within Avon and Somerset. It's why the National Threat Assessment currently has us graded as a nation as severe. That means an attack is highly likely. Now, we know that the national network, of which Avon and Somerset are part, our special branch officers, working together with the security services and police forces across the United Kingdom, are working incredibly hard, rolling their sleeves up to prevent the likelihood of any attacks. And we're doing that in lots of ways, and in lots of ways we're being successful, as has been publicised recently. But we can't guarantee it won't happen here, of course. But what I can say, and be really clear about, is there is no specific intelligence of an attack in Avon or Somerset.
If we were to see an attack here, and God forbid, let's hope it never happens, but if it was, when we've seen it in other parts of the country, it sometimes can be to the detriment of business as usual, such as the neighbourhood policing. How would you measure, how would you weigh that up?
The impact of the recent terror attacks inside London, in Manchester, has actually placed huge pressures on the people that we have dealing with that sort of work. And so we're currently potentially providing more detectives to support those very significant investigations that are going on. So we're part of a national network, and so if heaven forbid such a thing happened here, we would be supported by the Metropolitan Police, we would be supported by the security services and every other police force that we needed to support us. So we wouldn't be on our own.
Right.
It would be my job to make sure that there was what we call business continuity. So we return to normal and everyday policing as quickly as possible. But if we were to have a significant attack with Avon and Somerset, it would have a huge impact on our ability to go about our everyday policing activities. But we would manage, because that is what police officers and police staff do. It's in our culture. So we've got contingency plans, and all I can do is reassure you that you can look at them, we would put them in place, but it absolutely would have a massive impact on the way that we were able to run the organisation.
And then linking to that and moving on to hate crime, we've talked about this on a few occasions, but hate crime can be linked very closely to these terrorist attacks. And has there been an increase since Manchester and London in Avon and Somerset?
Well, notwithstanding those specific events, year on year we've seen an increase in the number of hate crimes that we've recorded by about 40% this year compared to the last year.
Mm-hmm.
And we recorded in that last year about 3,500, so it's a lot. That's a lot of unpleasant crime, and that's a lot of hate. We think there are a number of reasons that we would attribute that to. We hope that people are more confident in coming forward to report it because they believe that we will take them seriously and do something about it. We believe that our crime recording standards, the standards which we ensure we record a crime when one's been reported, with your accountability, and you've asked me a lot of difficult questions on this over the last 18 months, have got much better. We think now it's only a very small number of crimes that are slipping through the net and not officially being recorded, and we continue our work on that. So we think we've got better at recording. I think the third thing is that there is lots of evidence to show that when we have an incident, particularly around terrorist attack, that actually it can cause, very regrettably, and without justification at all, an increase in hate crime. When there has been a terrorist attack, working with all police forces across England and Wales, we coordinate a central count and manage the increase in hate crime, and we specifically try and come to a conclusion about whether they're associated with that terrorist attack or that incident or not. And so I'm afraid that all of these attacks have shown a spike in the incidents and reporting of hate crime in the 6 weeks, particularly after the event.
And if someone was watching this who's been a victim of hate crime, what would you say to them?
Well, it's a really horrible thing to be a victim of crime anyway. And Sue, I know that you speak to lots and lots of victims of crime, probably more than me, because of the nature of your job. And so you've got an insight into what impact that has on people's lives. It can stop them doing the things they want to do. Of course, huge amount of pain. And of course, we've done things such as set up Lighthouse to try and improve the service we offer to them. But when you're talking about hate crime, that crime's committed against an individual because of who they are, their identity, whether it's about their race, their religion, their ethnicity, their sexuality, their disability. And actually, that suddenly becomes much more personal. And never mind, it might stop them going about their lives in the way they want. It almost certainly will. So that is something we will absolutely take really seriously, and we would urge people to report it to us. If it's a crime in action and there's an offender there and we need to come and help protect an individual or make an arrest, it's 999. Other than that, it's 101. And actually, if people are nervous about contacting the police direct, they can talk to our partner agencies, which might include SARI, but we'll also call into Crime Stoppers. So 0800 and 555 111. So there's lots of ways that it can be reported, but what I would say is do not tolerate it. It's not all right, and it's not part of our lives in society.
So we would urge anyone that if they have been a victim to please come forward in whatever way they feel comfortable with, because the police need to know.
Absolutely, and I think just to go a little bit further than that, and we did have some examples of this after the recent terrorist attacks. If you are a member of the public and you see a hate crime taking place, do please contact the police. Come forward as a witness and support the individual. I'm not saying you should get involved. People must use their own judgment about that, but please tell us, and I know that people have done that.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, so let's move on to a very different subject, female genital mutilation. This is child abuse, first and foremost, and it happens in certain communities in the UK. It basically, for those who don't know, it involves a partial, total removal of female external genital organs. And what can you tell people who are listening to this? What can you tell me that the constabulary is doing against this evil crime?
Well, it is a crime. It's not a new crime because it is a practice that, as I understand it, has probably been happening for many years within certain cultures. But it's, to be honest with you, sir, it's a new one for the police to deal with within the United Kingdom, which illustrates part of the reason why we're still getting to grips with it. And we may well talk about some of the reasons why it's difficult and hidden in many respects in a moment. But we're doing an awful lot to deal with it. We are one of the leading police forces within England and Wales, so we've offered advice to over half the constabularies in England and Wales, and certainly are offered up by the Home Office as a force which is demonstrating real ability and commitment to tackle this, as you say, horrible crime. So we're working with other agencies primarily, first and foremostly to raise awareness of this sort of criminality within communities that may be affected by it, to encourage lines of reporting and communication. We're giving lots of advisory messages within schools and beyond, but we're also using the powers that are available to us. So we're one of the highest users of a female genital mutilation order that actually may prevent the travel of children.
Preventing it from happening.
Yeah, preventing it from happening. Because prevention is clearly the most important part of this. It's a horrible thing. It's an assault. It's a crime, and it's very dangerous as well.
And is it true that it's more prevalent during the summer months?
There are yes, and there are certain reasons for that. So if you think about it, like any crime, it's about firstly someone has a desire to commit that crime. And then it's where does the opportunity present itself to commit the crime without being caught. Now, on most occasions where this is happening, girls are being taken out of the United Kingdom, and this assault, I think to call it surgery is overstating the skill of the people involved. So it's this assault, it's mutilation, is taking place overseas. So the reason why it might be happening more in the summer is where is the opportunity to take a child, out of school overseas, disappear for a few weeks, months, and actually allow the recovery period to get the child back into mainstream life in the UK without it being noticed. But there are different levels of mutilation, from the complete removal of the female organs and some other really unpleasant things, through to what might be called a ritualistic nick, neither of which are acceptable. But of course, the time taken to conduct a smaller assault, a ritualistic nick, if I call it that, to getting a child back into school unnoticed might be considerably less. So any school holiday period is an issue. The summer is the longest one.
Okay. I mean, it is said that in Avon and Somerset we may have 2,000 girls that are at risk. So, and I know that the constabulary are doing an enormous amount of work on this in the communities. So why is it so difficult to get a successful prosecution?
Well, we're targeting that preventative work on the agencies that need to know, and the professionals that can help, and the communities that can actually stop this happening. So that's where the majority of the work's been targeting, and it's incredibly labour intensive. The question is, why have we not got a conviction yet? I think there are a number of reasons, but they do include these. First and foremostly, the families within which this is occurring aren't necessarily families that would come to the attention of social services or the police for child abuse. This is a different sort of abuse, so they wouldn't necessarily be on our radar. That means it may be more difficult to put them on our radar. The second thing is actually it involves families, and of course there are loyalties and relationships within families, and the girls subject to this awful barbaric process find it very difficult, understandably, to give evidence in a way that could be used against their parents. And then I think the third key reason why this is under the radar, so to speak, in many respects, is that actually it does involve girls' genitalia. And actually that is a very, very private area. It's not as obvious as a child that gets a punch in the face or a clip around the ear and has a bruised eye. It is literally hidden and very, very difficult to talk about openly. None of this is an excuse. None of this means that we shouldn't be pursuing prosecutions, and we are. We're very rigorously pursuing prosecutions. But prosecution is just part of the solution here.
Sure.
What we're trying to do is prevent
it from happening in the first place.
And so we're doing lots and lots of work, which includes bringing those responsible to justice.
Yes, I'm fully aware that the constabulary are doing an enormous amount. Okay, so let's move on to road safety. This is something that I get many queries about, and I'm sure you do too. And so let's talk very specifically about the average speed cameras on the M32 and the installation of the cameras on the M4, M5 interchange. And we've had several questions about how does the average speed camera work and the managed motorway. Are you able to explain?
So the police, yes, I can. So the police are not responsible for the erection and maintenance of these cameras. Highways Authority are. And clearly we're a key partner, and they will take our advice into account about where they go. As a police officer with 30 years experience, I know that speed is one of our fatal four. I know that it can be responsible for road deaths, and actually one of the most I guess traumatic and lasting experiences I've had as a police officer is cradling a child's head, 4-year-old child who's knocked down and killed where speed was an issue. So it's real, and it affects families, and we don't want to have to deal with that. So the cameras are a significant part of reducing speed, particularly on those strategic road networks. And actually they work through the automatic number plate recognition system. So a motorist, their cameras might be forward-facing or reverse-facing, will drive through, the plate will be clocked. The average speed is then calculated from the next occasion in successive cameras that the number plate is clocked thereafter. And then we have criteria and thresholds which will govern when an individual be no action taken, or they might be offered an education opportunity, or they might end up getting a fixed price ticket or a summons. So put simply, that's how it works. And I would say there's a criminology theory called the desistance theory. If people are to be deterred from committing a crime, it's pretty accepted scientifically that actually a risk of being caught plays a role in it. So if people think they're going to get caught from speeding, they will try not to get caught, especially if they're going to get disqualified. So I think the cameras are effective.
Well, I do too, as you know.
Yeah.
There is often concern that the speed cameras are switched on just in order to generate income from the, for the police from motorists. Could you explain about what happens to the money that's generated from those?
Yeah, first of all, Sue, I would say that's not true at all. If it were true, we probably wouldn't be making the very significant savings that we've been making in policing over the last 6 to 7 years. So if somebody gets a fixed penalty notice and pays it, then none of that money comes to the police. If somebody goes to court and pays a fine, none of that money goes to the police. However, for a lower level of threshold, so let's take a 30-mile-an-hour limit, the prosecution level is 10% plus 2. So you will not experience any enforcement until you register for doing 35. By the way, that's not an invitation to travel up to 35, but it recognises that people sometimes make small mistakes. Between 35 and an upper threshold, which is 42, you would be given, if it was your first offence in the last 3 years, an opportunity to attend a speed awareness course. Okay. Now, the cost of doing that is you would pay £80 and you'd have to give up some of your time to go and do it. A fixed penalty ticket costs £100. If you go to court, who knows how much you'll be fined. Of that £80, I'm sorry, this is a complicated answer, 35% of it comes to the constabulary to manage the administration of that process. £5 goes to a national scheme to make sure people don't get caught more than once and coordinate our efforts, and then £40 goes to the provider of the speed awareness education. So we spend most of that £35 of our bit on the administrative aspect of maintaining the cameras, conducting the administration around the enforcement capability. There is a small residue which goes into road safety and road education to prevent road death and harm on our roads. So none of it at all goes back into mainstream policing, and a small amount goes into road safety.
Okay, thank you for that. Barry, a local road safety campaigner, has contacted us asking that when the police investigate a road traffic collision, why aren't the reports made public?
So the collision involves people, and the simple reason is that actually to redact or remove the personal information, and it may be a very personal, a hurtful experience that people have been through, whatever their role in it, it's not right to put that personal information in a public environment where people would have access to it. The cost of redacting all of that personal information, I'm afraid, my position is that it's disproportionate to the benefit of putting it into a public domain. However, we do work really, really carefully to collate all of our causation figures around collisions, and we are working towards putting that more broad, depersonalised information into a public domain so people can see it.
And I suppose that's what we've got to try and learn the lessons. So taking out the personal, which I completely get, also learning lessons about what could have caused it.
Yeah, and it's right that there's transparency about that information.
Okay, we have another local resident, Elaine, and she's asked, what is the police's role in enforcing road traffic regulations and educating road users to use the road safely? And also asked, what role does the dash cam footage play in the process?
Well, lots of partners have got a role in making our roads safer. Local authority and fire and rescue, for instance, have got an important role. So we work in partnerships in Bristol, Avon, and also Somerset to actually take preventative measures, educate people, prevent crime. Obviously, we have the primary role around enforcement, particularly as far as speed is concerned. Local authority, for instance, have the primary role around engineering processes and what our roads look like to design the problem out. I would say there is a challenge for the community and all watching here, and the challenge is that actually the roads are as safe as we make them. Now, of course,
the roads aren't dangerous per se, are they?
They should be designed in a way that helps road safety, and all of that learning analysis is done. The police should do the enforcement for the people that actually are criminally minded, but actually all of the rest of us have got a responsibility in our everyday lives about what we do to help make the environment and the community that we live in safer. And so I'm throwing, there's fewer police officers around to do enforcement. We're not going to enforce this problem out. I need the public to take some responsibility here. On the question of dash cams, we have developed a capability to download digital material into our control rooms. There is a real risk that if we invite complete indiscreet, as it were, downloads of all sorts of digital material, that we will be completely swamped. So we're working through this stage by stage, and head cams for motorcyclists and cyclists, dash cams are providing really, really important material for prosecutions, and so there is much more of that to come in the future.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Andy. That's road safety is something that I get many letters about, and I think it's something that really matters to our local residents. So thank you for taking the time, and I hope you found that interesting. Our next live chat is September the 27th. So that's when the summer will have finished. I hope it improves between now and then. I think I'd like to just remind you that as your Police and Crime Commissioner, I am here to serve you. So if you have questions, if you've got concerns, then please contact me, have a look at my website, and that will show you ways that you can contact me. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Andy, as well.
Thank you.